So what if a single concept, seemingly simple on the surface, actually holds the key? What if it unlocks a profound understanding of how we form our deepest beliefs, challenge long-held assumptions, and even, define reality itself?
Hmm.
Imagine if this concept, which we're calling Alexander's question, isn't just one single question, but more like a rich tapestry of inquiries spanning millennia,
Oh, yeah.
from ancient battlefields to modern philosophy.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Most fascinating ideas and pull out the essential insights just for you.
Yeah, get right to the good stuff.
Today, we're embarking on a really captivating journey. We're exploring this remarkable paper that meticulously unpacks this multifaceted idea of Alexander's questions.
This is plural. That's key.
Exactly. And it argues for its immense, maybe often overlooked, value in understanding a powerful modern conversational approach. You might have heard of it. Street Epistemology. So for you, our listener, this deep dive is kind of your shortcut, a way to grapple with some complex but really vital ideas about critical thinking, problem solving, and, well, the very nature of truth in our world today.
And hopefully have a bit of fun along the way. We'll try.
We promise surprising facts and just enough humor to keep you hooked. Okay, but before we properly dive in, we really have to give a huge nod to the tools that made this possible.
Oh, absolutely.
For pulling together all these intricate details from so many different sources, making our research truly comprehensive. Well, we're incredibly grateful to Gemini 2.5 Flash with deep research.
Yeah, did an amazing job connecting all these threads. Really allowed us to see the bigger picture.
It really did. And for the seamless voiceovers that bring some of the direct quotes to life throughout our discussion today, adding that immersive layer, well, we're immensely grateful to Notebook LM.
It definitely helps. Hearing the words in context makes a difference.
So the paper at the heart of our discussion is titled Alexander's Epistemological Questions and Street Epistemology Training. And its core argument is, I think, both elegant and really profound. It basically says, Alexander's question isn't one single thing. Not at all.
Far from it. It's actually this really multifaceted concept.
Right.
It represents all these different profound inquiries and philosophical ideas linked to various historical figures, thinkers.
Who all just happen to be named Alexander.
That's exactly.
Oh,
It's
cool.
quite the coincidence, or maybe just a useful framing device.
And what's really compelling, I think, is how the paper then connects these diverse Alexander's questions to the fundamental principles of street epistemology.
Yeah, that's the crucial link. It makes a really strong case that weaving these historical insights into SE training could significantly enrich its depth, broaden its applicability.
And just strengthen its overall intellectual foundation.
Precisely. It's about recognizing these timeless threads of human inquiry, how people have always questioned things, and seeing how relevant that is for how we talk about beliefs today.
Okay, so let's peel back the layers here. The phrase Alexander's question immediately makes you think of, I don't know, one specific riddle, like the Gordian knot, maybe?
Right, or maybe one single philosophical problem.
Yeah. But as we really got into this research, it became super clear that this concept is anything but monolithic.
Not at all.
It's actually this vibrant, really rich tapestry, questions, dilemmas, deep philosophical concepts, each one tied to a different Alexander throughout history.
And what's remarkable, really, is how each of these inquiries, in its own specific context, they all seem to converge on these fundamental themes.
Themes central to how we know what we know.
Exactly. How we acquire knowledge, how we justify our beliefs, and ultimately how we solve problems. It keeps coming back to those core ideas.
What I find truly fascinating here is how these seemingly disparate inquiries, you've got a conquering king, a somewhat obscure philosopher, a modern neurosurgeon.
A real mix.
A real mix. Yet they all consistently touch upon this fundamental human drive, this pursuit of understanding, justification, finding effective ways to solve problems.
Which naturally leads us to a pretty important question, doesn't it? What can we actually learn about epistemology? The theory of knowledge, how we know what we know from such a diverse group.
Right. It seems like a random collection at first glance.
But it turns out the answer is quite a lot. Because these figures, through their own unique challenges and insights, they actually reveal these consistent patterns in how humans interrogate reality, how we navigate uncertainty. It's kind of profound.
And when we talk about Alexander's questions, I feel like we almost have to start with the big one. the most famous Alexander.
Alexander the Great, yeah, you can't really avoid him in this context.
His questions weren't always like spoken out loud as questions, right? They often showed up as these pivotal actions or these really deep dilemmas that profoundly shaped his legacy.
That's a great point. Take his journey, that really arduous and symbolic pilgrimage to the Oracle of Ammon, way out in the Siwa Oasis back in 331 BCE.
Yeah, deep in the desert.
Exactly. And this wasn't just like a casual spiritual side trip for Alexander. The historical accounts, they make it pretty clear it was this deep personal quest.
Yeah.
And undeniably political, too.
Political because he wanted to confirm his divine parentage, that Ammon was his father, not Philip.
Precisely. Multiple ancient historians, Plutarch, Curtius, Justin, Diodorus, they all consistently report that Alexander came out of that secret meeting, profoundly satisfied, convinced.
Convinced Ammon was his real father.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a private belief he kept quiet about.
No way. It became a huge strategic thing. Right?
Absolutely. This conviction, whether it was genuinely held deep down or just politically useful, or maybe both, it absolutely solidified his godlike status as ruler.
Something he actively pushed, right? Building on what his mother, Olympias, had told him.
Exactly. She'd apparently groomed him from a young age to believe in this divine destiny. And the Egyptians, well, they were used to pharaohs being seen as gods, so they readily accepted him as the son of Ammon.
Which must have helped legitimize his rule there.
Immensely. It legitimized his rule, boosted troop morale and devotion, and ultimately helped fuel his legendary conquests.
So the key insight here, epistemologically speaking,
it's about how truth and justification are so deeply tied to culture and context. Alexander used a divine narrative for power. It shows us how beliefs, even ones that are clearly politically advantageous, can be genuinely held.
Or at least presented as genuinely held.
Right. And it highlights how crucial it is to question the foundations of authority, whether it's ancient divine right or modern expertise. This question to the oracle about his parentage, it really digs into the epistemic basis of authority back then.
How do you prove you have the right to rule?
Exactly. And in Alexander's world, divine favor was incredibly powerful, almost undeniable justification. What's really complex, though, as the sources hint, is that while he clearly used this claim politically,
he might have actually believed it too.
There's strong evidence suggesting a genuine, deeply ingrained personal conviction that existed before it became strategically useful.
Yeah.
And that duality that a belief can be real and useful makes understanding the true foundations of conviction incredibly tricky.
It's a powerful lesson in how belief and power get tangled up.
Definitely.
Okay, so we pivot from the Desert Oracle to another legendary story, the Gordian Knot.
Ah, yes, the ultimate puzzle.
The ancient prophecy was clear. Whoever unties this incredibly complex knot gets to conquer all of Asia. Big stakes.
Huge.
And Alexander, being Alexander, well, he didn't try to painstakingly untangle it like everyone else supposedly did.
No, he was more direct, pragmatic. One account suggests he just found the pin holding the whole thing to the wagon pole and yanked it out. Not solved instantly.
And the other, more famous version.
The more dramatic one, yeah. That he just drew his sword and sliced it clean in half. Boom. Done.
Regardless of exactly how he did it, that act really shows his unique leadership style, right? His conviction that no problem was unsolvable.
He just had to find the right angle to solve it. That's the key quote often associated with it. And it's just prime problem reframing, a powerful cognitive shift.
So instead of focusing on how do I untie this impossible thing,
he reframed it. He thought, how do I fulfill the prophecy? Or maybe just, how do I get past this obstacle? That shift in how he defined the problem led directly to a novel, really effective solution.
It's a practical challenge, but it demands you reevaluate your assumptions about the problem itself.
Exactly. Which, for our purposes, is a powerful epistemological lesson. How do we approach difficulties? Do we just keep banging our head against the wall, or do we step back and ask if we're even asking the right question?
It suggests that sometimes the breakthrough isn't about trying harder with the existing rules.
It's about questioning the rules themselves. Maybe even breaking them, like Alexander did with his sword.
Okay, another Alexander the Great example. His interaction with King Porus of India after defeating him.
A very telling encounter.
Alexander, showing some respect, apparently asked him, "How shall I treat you?"
And Porus's reply, even in defeat, was incredibly proud. He said something like, "Kill me or treat me as the king I am."
The key there being I am. Present tense. He hadn't given up his identity.
Right. He refused to see himself as a former king. And Alexander reportedly was deeply impressed by this unwavering self-identity, this dignity.
So impressed, he treated him with respect. Didn't kill him.
Not only spared him, but made him an ally. This story is often presented as this crucial lesson in leadership about creating identities and building alliances by recognizing and respecting the other person's core self-identity.
It really highlights how much self-perception matters, doesn't it? In resistance, in dialogue.
Absolutely. Porus's refusal to use the past tense showed this powerful internal conviction that went beyond his current situation. And Alexander's respect for that suggests a really sophisticated understanding. He saw that acknowledging someone's deeply held self-perception, even if it seems unrealistic from the outside.
It can actually be a path to alliance, even with someone you just defeated.
Exactly. It's a historical precedent that offers guidance for us today, maybe. Maintaining a non-judgmental stance, having empathy when you engage with someone who has a really strong, unyielding self-perception or belief, even if it clashes with your reality.
It suggests that sometimes understanding who someone thinks they are is more important than arguing about what you think they are.
Well put. It's about meeting them where they perceive themselves to be.
And finally, from Alexander the Great, there's this grand vision of homonoia.
Homonoia, yeah. That Greek idea of conquered unity of mind and heart.
He apparently articulated this vision in a speech at Opus. His dream was for all mortals from now on live like one people in Concord and for mutual advancement. Pretty idealistic stuff.
Very. He genuinely seemed to believe that God was the common father of all mankind. And crucially, that virtue goodness, character not race, or where you came from, should be the real basis for classifying people.
Which directly challenged his old tutor, right?
Yeah.
Aristotle.
Big time. Aristotle had famously advised treating Greeks as friends and, well, everyone else, barbarians, as enemies or inferiors. Standard thinking for the time.
But Alexander rejected that. He said virtue is the real distinction.
Yeah. So his implicit question here was fundamental. What's the true basis for how humans should classify and interact with each other? What really divides us and what truly unites us?
And his answer flew in the face of the accepted truth of his era, challenged ingrained prejudice.
Absolutely. This particular Alexander's question really embodies a core epistemological debate. How do societies arrive at universal truths about human nature? And maybe more importantly, how can those deeply ingrained prejudices, the ones that cause so much division and conflict, be effectively challenged and maybe even overcome?
It's about questioning the very frameworks we use to categorize people, looking for unity instead of division.
Precisely. Questioning the categories themselves can lead to surprising insights.
Okay, so that's Alexander the Great. Inquiry through action, leadership, vision. But as the paper makes really clear, Alexander's question isn't just about ancient conquerors. It takes a fascinating, maybe a bit denser turn into philosophy.
Right. We move beyond the historical figure to various philosophers, also named Alexander, who posed equally fundamental questions. Questions that really challenge our standard understanding of ontology, the study of existence, what's real, and epistemology, how we know things.
Yeah, these are the really deep dives into how we perceive reality.
Definitely getting into the weeds here, in a good way.
First up, Samuel Alexander, and what the paper calls his dictum. He was part of British emergentism.
That's right. Samuel Alexander, a prominent figure there. His work, implicitly anyway, holds that for something to be considered real, it has to produce any manifestation of its existence. It has to do something, show itself somehow.
Okay, sounds reasonable enough so far.
But here's where it gets tricky. When you combine that idea with more contemporary philosophical worries about something called causal exclusion.
Causal exclusion, what's that, basically?
It's the worry that maybe higher-level complex things like glaciers, trees, maybe even our thoughts don't really cause anything directly. That maybe it's always just the underlying tiny particles, the microphysics, doing all the actual causal work.
Huh. So the glacier doesn't carve the valley, the particles making up the glacier do.
That's the worry. The idea is that whenever a familiar object, like that glacier or a tree providing shade, seems to cause something, its more fundamental components, the microparticles, actually have a better, more direct claim to having caused that exact outcome.
Which implies?
It implies that familiar objects, as we normally think of them, might not have genuine causal power. And if they don't have causal power, according to Alexander's dictum about needing to manifest existence, well, it threatens their very reality.
Whoa. Okay, that is mind-bending. So this Alexander's question forces us into asking, how do we really know what's real? Or what actually causes what?
Exactly. It pushes us hard on those questions, and it connects directly to some of the deepest puzzles in science and philosophy, like the hard problem of consciousness. How does physical stuff create subjective experience? Or quantum physics measurement paradox. Does observing reality change it?
It feels like it undermines our everyday intuition about the world.
It absolutely does. It's a prime example of rigorously challenging those deeply held, often totally unexamined, assumptions we have about existence and evidence. It forces us to look closely at the methods we use to decide what's real and what causes what. It makes us realize our intuitive grasp of reality is maybe way more fragile than we think.
Wow. Okay. Let's move to another Alexander. Alexander Guerrero and his interested expert problem. This one feels, well, incredibly relevant right now.
It really does. Almost uncomfortably relevant in our current information landscape. Guerrero focuses meticulously on the epistemic problem posed by experts, people who undeniably know a lot about their field. But they also have a distinct set of values and preferences regarding that field. They have skin in the game, basically, which raises a critical question for all of us. Can we rationally or justifiably form beliefs by relying on testimony from experts who have a vested interest?
He even applies this to juries, right? Questioning if interested experts should serve or if lawyers can strike them for that reason.
Yeah, his work explores that too. It forces us to think hard about how our reliance on expert knowledge can be skewed by their inherent biases or interests.
This seems to hit right at a core social dimension of epistemology. How do we accurately judge the reliability of information when the source, even a highly credentialed expert source, has a personal stake in the outcome or a particular interpretation?
It's a constant challenge, isn't it? We're bombarded with information from perceived authorities, political analysts, scientists with specific funding, social media influencers, many of whom have clear interests.
So the mere fact that an expert has an interest challenges our ability to just trust their testimony.
According to Guerrero's analysis, yes, it challenges our ability to form truly justified beliefs based solely on that testimony. The paper points out this implies a need for more or stronger evidence in situations with high stakes, especially moral ones. Like the example given is affirmative consent. The standard of justification there needs to be incredibly high because of the stakes involved.
So this Alexander's question gives us a framework for thinking about reliability when we're trusting others, especially when things like group loyalty, personal gain, or ideology might be influencing their assessment.
Exactly. It's a framework for discussing the reliability of the methods we use to gain knowledge when those methods involve relying on other people. It teaches us, or reminds us, to be discerning consumers of information, to always ask, what's the source? What are their potential interests?
Critical thinking about the source, not just the information.
Precisely.
Okay, our journey through these Alexanders now brings us to F. Matthias Alexander. He was an Australian elocutionist and actor, right? And he developed the Alexander technique.
That's him. And his question was intensely personal. Embodied, really. It came directly from his own struggle.
He had serious vocal problems that threatened his acting career.
Profoundly. Recurring issues with hoarseness, loss of voice on stage. And as he documented, his whole transformative journey began with a question. The core of his inquiry wasn't just, what's wrong with my voice?
It was deeper than that.
Much deeper. It was an iterative process. Years of sustained self-observation, systematic experimentation, trying to understand how he was using his body, his vocal organs, incorrectly to produce that strain. He needed to understand the underlying cause, the habit, not just the symptom.
So he was looking for the events that led him to ask the question in the first place. It was about the process of misuse.
Exactly. It was rooted in direct personal experience and really rigorous self-analysis, not just relying on doctors or external fixes.
So this Alexander's question feels really unique. It's internal, embodied. It shows this clear cause and effect chain. Symptoms lead to self-observation, which leads to identifying misuse, which leads to self-correction.
Right. It's like an internal epistemology. It highlights the huge importance of self-reflection, of understanding our own habitual ways of doing things physically, mentally. It pushes epistemology beyond just external facts and data into the realm of internal mechanisms, perception, ingrained habits.
It's about knowing yourself, how your own patterns contribute to your reality.
And how observing those patterns is the first step to changing them. It's a powerful reminder that knowing isn't just about the outside world, it's also deeply about understanding our own internal landscape.
Then there's the classic barometer question. I feel like everyone's heard some version of this.
Yeah, it's a perennial favorite in discussions about education and critical thinking. For good reason.
It's that physics exam question. Use a barometer to find the height of a building. And the student gives all these clever, technically correct, but totally unconventional answers.
Right. Instead of the expected formula involving air pressure, the student suggests things like, drop the barometer off the roof and time its fall.
Use it as a pendulum, measure the period.
Or, my personal favorite, find the building superintendent and say, I'll give you this nice barometer if you tell me how tall the building is.
Aha! Right. These answers completely bypass the expected physics, but they show a different kind of understanding, don't they?
Absolutely. They show a deeper, more flexible understanding of problem solving and of the barometer itself as a physical object with various properties, not just a tool for one specific formula.
It's often used to illustrate that critical thinking isn't just about knowing the science formula in isolation.
Right. It's more about the ability to creatively apply the key pieces required for putting together the puzzle in new ways. It's also a great cautionary tale against just rote learning, just memorizing methods without understanding the underlying concepts.
It warns against rigidly sticking to the method when it's disconnected from real understanding.
Subscribing is the only way to keep the cows from learning TikTok dances? Oh my God.
The stakes have been raised.
I know, it's like we have to save the world
Yeah, we have to protect the internet.
from dancing cows.
It's about ingenuity over memorization.
Precisely. This anecdote really highlights that tension between just repeating memorized stuff and genuine problem-solving ability, which demands flexibility. The students' answers are correct in a broader sense because they show this agile understanding. They didn't just follow the script.
Which leads to the implicit question here. What really counts as understanding or knowledge? Is it just recall of facts and methods, or is it something more?
Yeah. It serves as this wonderful metaphor for inquiry that values the process of thinking, the flexibility of approach, the reliability of different methods over just getting the single right answer defined by the teacher. It makes us ask, are we actually thinking or are we just following instructions?
Okay, our deep dive continues, moving into territory that challenges fundamental beliefs about history, religion, even reality itself.
Yeah, we're not shying away from the big stuff here. Let's talk about Philip S. Alexander. He's a distinguished scholar of Judaism and Christianity.
And his question seems simple on the surface, but isn't.
Exactly. He looks at the question, when did Christianity and Judaism actually separate? He calls it one of those deceptively simple questions which should be approached with great care.
Why deceptive? Didn't they just split at some point?
Well, he argues that the common narrative, what he calls the old paradigm, often pushed by both Christian and Jewish scholars for their own reasons, drastically oversimplifies things. It tends to paint pre-Christian Judaism as this single monolithic religion, which just wasn't historically accurate. There was huge diversity.
So it's anachronistic, reading the present back onto the past.
Precisely. He proposes a much more nuanced model. Think of a Venn diagram. The two religions started as overlapping circles, and they only very gradually, very complexly moved apart over centuries. There wasn't one clean break, one parting of the ways.
So his research challenges these neat, tidy historical stories we tell ourselves, especially ones driven by apologetic motives.
Exactly. Apologetic motives, the desire to defend or justify your own current beliefs or traditions, can seriously distort how we understand history. This Alexander's question is fundamentally about how religious narratives get constructed and how bias shapes our view of the past.
It shows how wanting to justify a current belief can lead us to accept simplified, maybe biased, histories as truth.
Absolutely. It powerfully encourages us to probe deeper, to look for those underlying motivations, the potential biases, the oversimplifications that often form the basis of deeply held beliefs rooted in history or tradition. It reminds us that historical truth is often way more complex and messy, more of an evolving understanding than a simple static fact.
It's a crucial reminder to question not just the story itself, but who told it and why they told it that way.
Very well put. Question the narrative and the narrator.
Okay, finally we come to Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon who had a profound near-death experience, an NDE.
Yes, his story is quite remarkable and controversial. His NDE was apparently so compelling, so utterly inconsistent with his prior scientific understanding of the brain,
that it forced him to completely rethink consciousness.
fundamentally. He describes being forced to admit that consciousness is not created by the brain at all, but is allowed in by the filtering of the brain. A radical shift.
So his inquiries now are these huge existential questions. What happens when we die? Who or what is God? What is consciousness?
Exactly. He now leans towards a view where consciousness is fundamental. that all of reality emerges from what he calls a collective mind, rooted in God. It's a form of metaphysical idealism, the idea that reality is fundamentally mind-based, not matter-based.
So his questions are driven by this radical shift in his personal epistemology. How he knows what he knows changed dramatically because of this experience.
Precisely. His story is a powerful example of how intense personal experiences, especially extraordinary ones like NDEs, can be an incredibly potent, though obviously subjective way of forming beliefs. Potent enough to completely overturn a lifetime of scientific training and belief.
Which poses a really interesting challenge, doesn't it? How do we talk about beliefs that come from personal revelation or spiritual experience within a more, say, standard epistemological framework that values empirical evidence?
It's a huge challenge. SE and other frameworks don't necessarily dismiss these experiences, but the focus shifts. It becomes about understanding the methods the person used to integrate that profound experience into their overall worldview. How do they justify the conclusions they draw from it?
So it's about asking, how do you reconcile this deeply personal, subjective truth with other forms of knowledge, like objective science?
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that epistemology isn't just about objective data. It also has to grapple with how we process, interpret, and incorporate profound subjective experiences into our understanding of reality. It forces us to acknowledge the vast range of human experience and how it shapes what we believe.
Okay, so we've journeyed through all these different Alexanders. What's really striking, though, is how these threads start to weave together. Despite the huge diversity of contexts, battlefields, philosophy seminars, operating rooms.
Right, you start to see a pattern emerge.
Yeah. These Alexander's questions, they share these powerful commonalities that really hit at the core of epistemological concerns. It's like finding this universal human impulse to question, threaded through history, appearing again and again.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the paper argues these aren't just isolated stories or interesting historical footnotes, they're conceptual tools, lenses almost, for understanding the very nature of belief and knowledge. They show us these consistent patterns in human inquiry that cut across time and culture.
And the research pulls out several key common threads, right?
Yes, several really stand out and offer powerful insights for all of us.
One that seems almost foundational is challenging assumptions. It runs through so many of them.
Absolutely. From Alexander the Great literally cutting through the Gordian knot's assumed rules, to Philip S. Alexander carefully deconstructing centuries of accepted historical narrative, to even Alexander bravely challenging core neurological dogma about consciousness.
There's this consistent, almost revolutionary willingness to question the status quo, to question ingrained assumptions and conventional wisdom.
It really underscores that progress, genuine understanding, often huge personal shifts, they frequently start right there. By refusing to just accept things as they are and asking, wait, is that really true? How do we actually know that?
And tied closely to that is this relentless seeking of underlying reasons, of solid justifications.
Yeah, digging deeper. Whether it's Alexander the Great needing divine validation for his rule, or F. Matthias Alexander meticulously investigating the how behind his vocal problems, not just the what. These inquiries consistently probe for the foundational reasons, the reliable methods that justify belief, explain a problem, or account for a state of being.
Samuel Alexander's dictum pushes that to the philosophical limit, right? Demanding to know what manifestation of existence truly justifies reality itself.
Exactly. It forces an examination of the very basis of knowledge. It's about asking why and how do you know, relentlessly, until you hit something solid, or realize you haven't yet.
Problem reframing also seems central. Shifting perspective.
Definitely. The Gordian knot and the barometer question are just perfect illustrations of how dramatically changing your perspective on a problem can unlock not just new solutions, but often much deeper understandings. That cognitive flexibility, being able to change your lens, step outside the box, is absolutely fundamental.
It's about not being stuck in one way of looking at things.
Right. Seeing the problem or the belief from multiple angles.
And underlying all of this, whether it's explicit or implicit, is a grappling with the nature of truth and knowledge itself.
Always. They explore what actually counts as truth. Is it revealed by the gods? Is it empirically verifiable through experiment? Is it known through personal experience and introspection? Is it socially constructed by a community?
Samuel Alexander's work on causality, Guerrero's on expert bias, they directly tackle the complexities of how we acquire knowledge and justify it in different situations.
Yeah, they force us to ask, what's our standard for truth here in this specific context?
Yeah.
How confident should we be? And why? What method are we using?
And finally, there's this powerful interplay between belief, identity, and action.
That comes through so strongly. Alexander the Great's claims to divinity weren't just abstract ideas. They shaped his identity, drove his actions, changed history. His approach to Porus shows how respecting identity can influence outcomes.
It highlights that beliefs aren't just things we have, they're often part of who we are. They're deeply embedded in our sense of self.
Exactly. Understanding someone's deeply held belief often requires appreciating how it connects to their fundamental identity, personally or as part of a group.
So, when you recognize Alexander's question, not as one thing, but as this thematic framework.
It becomes this really versatile and powerful teaching tool, a pedagogical tool. It lets you explore epistemology, which can be pretty abstract and dry, through these compelling, relatable stories from history, philosophy, personal struggle.
It makes complex ideas way more accessible, more engaging.
Totally. It broadens what epistemology means in practice. It moves it beyond academic definitions into these concrete human experiences of questioning, discovering, understanding. It makes learning about how we know things feel intuitive and memorable.
Okay, so what does all this mean for us today? We've traced these profound Alexander's questions through history, seeing how they illuminate core aspects of human inquiry. Now, let's bring it home. Let's connect it to a modern, very practical approach to understanding belief. Street epistemology.
Right. Street epistemology is essentially a civil conversational method. It's designed to encourage people to take a closer look, to critically examine the reliability of their own deeply held beliefs, all through respectful dialogue.
And the goal isn't necessarily to change someone's mind about a specific belief.
Not primarily. The main objective is more about enhancing how beliefs are evaluated, how they were formed in the first place, how confident someone feels about them, and why. SE aims to foster critical thinking, genuine open-mindedness, and really cultivate a habit of evidence-based reasoning, all within everyday conversations.
It's described as a practice, a collection of skills, not just a theory.
Exactly. It's something you do. Skills and techniques you apply in sincere conversations to explore important topics, maybe discover new insights together.
And at its core, it uses Socratic methods, right? Asking open-ended questions.
Deeply Socratic. It uses carefully crafted, open-ended questions to stimulate critical thinking, to gently explore the assumptions lurking behind someone's statements. The goal is to help people arrive at their conclusions through their own reasoning process.
And to get them to reflect on how they came to hold their beliefs originally.
Precisely. It often involves what philosophers call elenchus, that Socratic technique of cross-examination, basically, but done gently, respectfully, to reveal inconsistencies or weaknesses in a belief, all through questioning, not arguing.
And that respectfulness, that non-confrontational stance is key.
Absolutely crucial.
Oh.
SE places huge emphasis on being respectful, civil, non-confrontational. It deliberately avoids debate, avoids trying to win. The focus is on mutual exploration, building rapport, creating a safe space for honest reflection.
So empathy, intellectual humility, being non-judgmental, those are foundational.
Totally foundational. Practitioners are trained not just to hear the words, but to actively listen, to try and understand the underlying motivations, the reasoning, even the emotions tied to a belief. That fosters mutual respect, deeper connection.
And fundamentally, it's about understanding epistemology, that core question of how people know something is true.
Yes, it meticulously explores the reliability of the methods used to derive one's confidence level in their beliefs. It pushes the conversation beyond what someone believes to how they justify it. That's where the real exploration happens. Your journey to deeper understanding starts here. NavigatingBeliefs.com. Sign up. It's free.
So it's not just learning, it's an adventure.
Yeah, like a quest for knowledge.
And they use tools like confidence scales, asking people to rate their certainty, 0 to 100.
Yeah, calibrated questioning. Those scales are simple but powerful tools. They help people articulate how strongly they hold a belief, and more importantly, the reasons for that level of certainty. It encourages critical reflection.
It helps people spot their own assumptions, maybe inconsistencies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And prompts them to reevaluate their reasoning. Key questions are things like, okay, so what exactly do you believe? Why do you believe that? How do you know it's true? Another big one. What hypothetically would it take for you to change your mind?
Designed to dig into the what, the why, and the how.
Precisely. Peeling back the layers.
Now, SC as a formal practice, it came from Dr. Peter Boghossian's book, A Manual for Creating Atheists.
That book introduced many of the core techniques back in 2013. But it's really important to stress the concepts themselves are much broader. They can be applied to any belief, not just religious ones.
And there's an organization now, Street Epistemology International. SCI.
Yes, SEI is a nonprofit, and they offer a free online course called Navigating Beliefs to teach and promote this method.
What seems really sophisticated about SE is how it takes these philosophical tools and applies them to just regular conversations.
Yeah, it bridges that gap between abstract philosophy and real-world belief evaluation. Its focus on how beliefs are formed and justified, rather than attacking what belief someone holds, is key.
It implicitly recognizes that lots of deeply held beliefs, even really sincere ones, might be based on unreliable methods.
Absolutely. Things like gut feelings, appeals to authority, my boss told me, or just something read online, I saw it on a blog. SE aims to improve a person's individual epistemology, their own process for figuring out what's true, to foster intellectual humility, encourage self-correction.
Okay, this is where it really clicks into place for me. The paper makes this incredibly insightful case. These historical and philosophical stories, the Alexander's questions we explored, they aren't just interesting anecdotes.
No, they're actually powerful analogies. Analogies for the core principles of street epistemology itself. They make these abstract ideas suddenly feel tangible, relatable, much more memorable.
So connecting it to the bigger picture, each Alexander's question becomes like a relatable story that illuminates something fundamental about SE and shows its deep roots in human history.
Exactly. Let's walk through a few examples, mapping them directly onto SE principles. It's pretty striking.
Okay, let's start with Alexander the Great at the Oracle of Ammon again. How does that map onto SE?
Perfect alignment with SE's focus on examining the reliability of belief-forming methods. Alexander's reliance on divine revelation for his legitimacy. That's a historical case study for how SE often engages with the reliability of faith or revelation as an epistemology.
And his actions based on that prophecy show the real-world consequences.
Right. It highlights the impact of our belief-forming methods. For an SE practitioner, this story prompts the question, what methods are people using? How reliable are those methods for getting to truth? It makes the abstract, how do you know, very concrete.
Okay, the Gordian knot. That seems like a slam dunk for Socratic questioning and problem reframing in SE.
Absolutely. Alexander's solution directly mirrors SE's emphasis on challenging conventional thinking, on reframing problems within a conversation. It shows the power of shifting perspective to find unconventional solutions, a key skill in SE when trying to help someone reevaluate a belief that feels stuck.
Just like Alexander looked beyond untangling, SE looks beyond the surface belief to the method underneath.
Exactly. Finding a new angle when the old one isn't working.
What about Alexander's interaction with Porus and his vision of homonoia, that unity idea?
Those are incredibly powerful illustrations of SE's core values. Empathy, building rapport, civility, and challenging assumptions. They show the power of respectful engagement, acknowledging identity, seeking common ground even with adversaries.
It reinforces SE's commitment to being non-confrontational.
Definitely. It shows that respecting the person's dignity, even when disagreeing strongly with their beliefs, can open doors to understanding, maybe even alliance, a vital lesson for difficult conversations.
Okay, shifting gears. Samuel Alexander's dictum, that really challenging idea about reality and causation, how does that fit with SE?
It aligned perfectly with SE's core commitment to understanding epistemology itself and rigorously challenging assumptions. Samuel Alexander forces this deep examination of what counts as manifestation of existence, what causal powers really means.
Which lines up with SE's pursuit of evidence-based reasoning, questioning the basis of knowledge.
Directly. It's about digging down to the foundational assumptions about reality that underpin our beliefs, asking, what does it even mean for this to be real or to cause that? It's a powerful, if abstract, tool for dissecting the roots of why someone believes something.
And Alexander Guerrero's interested expert problem, that feels so practical for SE.
Extremely practical. It aligns directly with SE's focus on understanding epistemology and, crucially, evaluating source reliability. It's a direct parallel for SE conversations where people often rely on potentially biased authorities, doctors, politicians, media.
It prompts the SE practitioner, and really all of us, to constantly ask, how reliable is this source, really, given their potential interests?
Yeah, absolutely vital for forming justified beliefs in today's world, where so much information comes from parties who might not prioritize objective truth.
F. Matthias Alexander, the elocutionist, and his self-observation journey.
That's a beautiful, almost poetic metaphor for critical reflection, self-discovery, and that kind of internal active listening. It represents deep introspection into one's own habits, biases, assumptions.
Which mirrors the self-discovery aspect of SE. where people are encouraged to introspect on why they believe something.
Exactly, to discover their assumptions about their own thinking. It highlights the crucial internal work involved in evaluating one's own beliefs. Epistemology isn't just external, it's internal too.
And the barometer question with the clever student.
A crystal clear link to Socratic questioning and critical thinking. It shows how unconventional answers, ones that step outside the expected method, can reveal much deeper, more flexible understanding.
Aligns with Essie's goal of getting beyond surface answers, exploring the underlying reasoning, emphasizing the process.
Precisely. It encourages looking for ingenuity and real understanding, not just conformity to the expected answer.
Philip S. Alexander, challenging the historical narrative about Judaism and Christianity.
A perfect example of challenging assumptions and deconstructing narratives. It shows how the Socratic method can scrutinize commonly held beliefs, especially historical or traditional ones, and expose those anachronistic interpretations or apologetic motives.
It promotes a more nuanced view, shows how history can be shaped by current biases.
Absolutely. A stark reminder that truth in history is often complex, evolving, and we need to question who constructed the narrative and why.
And finally, even Alexander, the neurosurgeon, and his NDE.
That aligns powerfully with understanding epistemology and critical reflection, especially around personal experience. His journey shows how a profound personal event can challenge scientific paradigms, force a total reevaluation.
While Essie focuses on reason, it has to engage with the role of personal experience.
It has to. This example prompts questions like, okay, how do you integrate this profound experience into your overall understanding? What methods justify the conclusions you draw from it? It's a vital reminder that personal truth, subjective revelation, deeply felt experiences, they are a huge part of how humans form beliefs.
Wow, okay, it's incredibly clear now. Weaving these stories into SC training would make it so much more dynamic, engaging, memorable.
Right. They provide this common cultural, intellectual reference point. They move beyond dry definitions to these concrete, compelling human stories.
Which would undoubtedly enhance how beliefs are evaluated in a way that feels relatable, impactful, and just deeply human.
Couldn't agree more.
So, given how perfectly these Alexander's questions seem to align with street epistemology, the obvious question arises, the one we had. Are they actually in the training? Are they part of what SEI teaches?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the paper addresses it directly. It reveals what it calls a significant gap.
A gap, meaning they aren't included.
Right. A direct look at SEI's official website, their Navigating Beliefs course materials.
Huh.
It confirms that Alexander's question, or any of these specific interpretations we've just discussed, isn't explicitly mentioned by name. It's not integrated into the current training materials or FAQs.
Wow, that feels like a pretty big missed opportunity, doesn't it?
I think so. While SE is clearly rooted in Socratic methods, draws implicitly from philosophy, it doesn't explicitly leverage these other incredibly rich historical and philosophical examples that illustrate its core principles so beautifully.
It suggests SEI might be underutilizing these powerful, memorable narratives that could really boost its accessibility, its perceived depth, its appeal.
I think that's a fair assessment based on the paper's findings. The lack of these explicit links means they're missing chances for deeper learner engagement, broader intellectual appeal, and just a richer context for practitioners.
Explicitly linking SE to this long tradition of inquiry could really strengthen its academic credibility too, right? Show its lineage.
Absolutely. It would demonstrate its continuity with a long respected tradition of critical thought, appealing potentially to academics, students, history buffs, people interested in the history of ideas, not just the current practice. It gives it more gravitas.
So the paper doesn't just point out this gap, it calls for action, suggests SEI should integrate these concepts.
Yes. It presents a clear and compelling rationale for why they should. It asks, if these stories are so powerful and aligned, why aren't they being used? And it lays out the concrete pedagogical benefits that integration could bring.
Okay, so what are those key benefits? Why should SEI do this?
Well, first and foremost, illustrating core SE principles. These narratives provide concrete, unforgettable examples for things like examining epistemology, problem reframing, challenging assumptions, critical reflection, navigating bias, practicing empathy.
Like using the Oracle of Ammon story when discussing beliefs based on faith or revelation.
Exactly. Or using the Gordian-Knot barometer question to demonstrate perspective shifts and creative problem-solving and inquiry. Philip S. Alexander's work on historical narratives, Samuel Alexander's on causality, these offer compelling examples of scrutinizing premises.
F. Matthias Alexander's self-observation journey becomes a metaphor for introspection.
Right. And Guerrero's interested expert problem gives a direct framework for talking about source evaluation, which is critical today. Alexander the Great with Porus, his hominoia vision, powerful illustrations of respect, identity, common ground.
And beyond just illustrating concepts, these stories are just more engaging, right? More memorable than abstract definitions.
Way more engaging. Historical anecdotes, philosophical dilemmas. They make the training more dynamic, more accessible, especially for people who don't have a formal philosophy background. They ground abstract ideas in relatable human experiences.
Plus, it strengthens the academic and historical context, gives SE deeper roots.
Definitely. Explicitly linking SE to these precedents reinforces its intellectual rigor. It shows it's part of this long tradition of critical thought, from ancient Greece to modern epistemology. That broadens its appeal significantly.
Does the paper offer specific ways SEI could actually do this, actionable steps?
It does. Very practical recommendations. For instance, develop dedicated subsections or modules in the Navigating Beliefs course using specific Alexander's questions as case studies.
Like an Oracle of Ammon module on faith epistemology, or a Gordian knot exercise on reframing.
Exactly. And beyond the course, they could use these questions as discussion prompts or role-playing scenarios in live workshops or community meetups. Let practitioners apply SE principles to these rich, complex historical dilemmas.
That sounds like it would really deepen the learning.
I think so. Another idea, a series of blog posts or articles on the SEI website exploring each Alexander's question and its relevance to SE. That creates ongoing educational content.
Maybe even an optional advanced module. Historical roots, the Alexander's questions.
That's another great suggestion from the paper for those who want to go deeper. And even for public demonstrations of SE, using these stories could be really engaging starting points. Showcases SE's connection to timeless human questions.
So if SEI were to implement these ideas, what are the expected benefits? What's the payoff?
Several key benefits outlined. First, enhanced pedagogical effectiveness. Using compelling stories makes complex ideas more intuitive, engaging, memorable. Leads to deeper, more lasting understanding.
Second, increased intellectual appeal, reaching a broader audience.
Right. Academics, students, history enthusiasts, critical thinkers, people interested in the intellectual heritage, not just the technique itself.
Third, practitioners get richer conversational frameworks, more tools in their toolbox.
Exactly. More diverse analogies, historical context to draw upon, enables more nuanced, sophisticated conversations about complex beliefs.
And finally, strengthen credibility, positioning SE as historically grounded.
Yes. Showing its roots in enduring philosophical traditions bolsters its academic and public standing, positions it not just as a modern technique, but as part of a long human endeavor to understand how we know and how to do it better.
Okay, so wrapping up. We've explored how Alexander's questions isn't just one thing. It's this powerful conceptual framework. It highlights these fundamental human activities, challenging assumptions, pursuing justifications, reframing problems.
From ancient rulers making strategic moves to modern philosophers wrestling with reality itself, these inquiries offer these timeless lessons on how we know what we know.
And by integrating these profound narratives, street epistemology, which is already such a valuable tool for civil dialogue and clear thinking, could become even more effective, more accessible, more intellectually robust.
Yeah, grounding a modern practice in millennia of human inquiry. It's a powerful combination.
So, as you go about your day, maybe think about this. Which Alexander's question resonates most with you right now? Is it about seeking the underlying reasons for your own strongly held beliefs? Is it about finding the courage to reframe a problem that feels impossible, maybe at work, maybe personally? Or is it about taking a harder look at the sources of information you rely on, considering their potential interests?
How might embracing the spirit of these different kinds of inquiry lead you to a deeper understanding, not just of the world, but maybe of your own mind, your own ways of thinking?
Keep diving deep, keep asking those difficult, maybe uncomfortable questions, and keep exploring how you know what you know.
That's the real ongoing mission of the deep dive.